In China, the best way to win a legal battle is to never enter the courtroom. Conflict is an expensive illusion. Westerners believe in the letter of the law, but the Chinese believe in the spirit of the deal. Lawsuits are for the desperate. Hexagram 6. Song. Conflict, literal meaning heaven and water moving apart. Silent code, the settlement algorithm. To the end, there is danger. Even if you win the case, you lose the relationship, the reputation, and the future. Stop suing, start settling. Let us decode why stopping in the middle is the only true victory in a land of Guangxi.
Imagine stepping into, like, a really high-stakes boardroom. You are totally armed to the teeth.
Oh, yeah, you've got all the paperwork.
Exactly. You got this ironclad, maybe a 100-page contract sitting right in front of you.
The masterpiece of modern legal engineering.
Right. It's been reviewed by, 3 separate tiers of corporate lawyers. You are absolutely confident that the law is completely on your side. The terms are locked down.
The penalties for a breach are severe.
Yeah, and you feel like you have essentially checkmated the people sitting across the table before the meeting even actually begins.
Right.
But then, somewhere around maybe hour 2 of the negotiations, you slowly start to realize something kind of terrifying.
That the document is useless.
Yeah. That thick, beautiful, incredibly expensive document in your hands. It is completely, utterly worthless. And, well, it's not worthless because the people across the table from you are, criminals trying to break the rules.
No, not at all.
It's worthless because they are operating on an entirely different set of rules altogether.
It really is the ultimate strategic nightmare. You show up prepared to play this highly aggressive game of chess, and you realize the other side is playing Go.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. The board looks somewhat similar. There are pieces moving around, but the objective, the mechanics, the very philosophy of the game, they're all fundamentally, radically different.
Yeah.
And the scary part is, in the world of global business or international relations, or honestly, even just basic human conflict, this exact scenario happens every single day.
Every day.
People are out there wielding contracts like swords, totally not realizing the other side doesn't even recognize the concept of a sword.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to completely dissect the anatomy of conflict, the mechanics of negotiation, and, well, what we are calling the illusion of absolute victory.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. And we are pulling from an incredibly diverse stack of sources for this analysis today. We're crossing ancient Eastern philosophy with modern behavioral economics.
In international corporate law.
Yeah, and even FBI hostage negotiation tactics, all to figure out why winning an argument or, winning a massive lawsuit might actually be the absolute worst thing you could do for your long-term survival.
Because we're exploring this massive cultural and strategic debate today.
Right. On one side, we have what we're calling the litigator mindset. This is the perspective where contracts are ironclad, rights are absolute, rules are rigid, and, conflicts are zero-sum games that you just have to win.
Total victory.
Right. And on the other side, we have the mediator mindset. This is where relationships, the whole concept of social capital, and the vital importance of saving face rule the day.
And honestly, the contrast between those two mindsets is basically the engine of almost every major misunderstanding in global business today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because why should you, the listener, care about this? Well, whether you are navigating a complex corporate merger across international borders or trying to deal with a deeply frustrating contractor who's currently remodeling your kitchen and running like 3 weeks behind.
Which is always stressful.
Oh, absolutely. Or honestly, just trying to survive a heated argument with your partner. Your ego and your obsession with winning are probably costing you dearly.
They usually do.
So today, we're going to learn the strategic, highly calculated prudence of stopping halfway.
To understand how to effectively resolve a conflict, or, well, better yet, how to avoid being destroyed by one, we first have to really understand how that conflict forms at a molecular level.
Right.
You cannot dismantle a bomb if you don't understand the circuitry that triggers it,
Yeah, you can know how it's wired.
Exactly. And that brings us to this brilliant diagnostic tool from our sources that is actually over 3 millennia old.
The I-Ching.
Yes, the I-Ching.
I love that we're starting here.
Yeah.
The I-Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. Specifically, our sources point us to Hexagram 6.
Hexagram 6.
And in the text, this hexagram is called song, which translates directly to conflict Or in some translations, I think it's the lawsuit. Let's break down the visual imagery of this hexagram because it perfectly illustrates the root cause of every dispute.
What's fascinating here is the visual metaphor. It's what makes this so powerful. The I-Ching uses these natural elemental forces to describe human psychology and social dynamics.
Right, so a hexagram is simply a symbol made of two three-line symbols.
Trigrams.
Yeah, trigrams stacked on top of each other. And in hexagram 6, the top trigram represents heaven, or the sky. The bottom trigram represents water.
And if you just think about the basic physics of those two elements in nature, you immediately see the problem.
Because heaven, the sky, the atmosphere, naturally moves upward.
Right,
It expands out and up, away from the earth.
Yeah, it ascends.
And water, by its very nature, flows downward. It is completely bound by gravity. It seeks the lowest possible point.
So they are completely stacked on top of each other at the start, occupying the same space, yet their intrinsic natures basically compel them to move in diametrically opposite directions.
Heaven and water moving apart.
Exactly. The text of the I-Ching explicitly states, heaven and water go their opposite ways. The image of conflict. It is the perfect, terrifying metaphor for a dispute where misaligned goals were just totally ignored at the very beginning.
That's such a striking image.
Right. The tension isn't just that two parties are fighting over a specific, microscopic detail. It's that their fundamental trajectories, their core motivations are completely divergent.
That reframes the entire concept of an argument for me.
Yeah.
The I-Ching is basically telling us that a lawsuit or a massive fight doesn't just spontaneously explode out of nowhere because someone made a mistake.
No, it doesn't.
It is the inevitable, almost mathematical result of two forces, whether that's two people or two giant corporations, that started out sitting at the exact same table, but fundamentally had opposed intentions and directions that they never bothered to reconcile.
And the text offers a really stark warning about this. It says, thus, in all his transactions, the superior man carefully considers the beginning.
Meaning, if you don't align those trajectories at the very start of a relationship, the lawsuit, the conflict, the huge explosion, it's already baked into the cake.
It's just waiting for a catalyst.
Which maps flawlessly onto the reality of modern business, specifically when we look at the source material analyzing Chinese business negotiation.
Yes, the cultural differences here are massive.
We have this commentary from Scribd in our stack that talks about something they call the legal illusion. And this really gets to the beating heart of the litigator versus mediator mindset. Let's talk about the litigator culture first.
Sure.
In the Western world, our entire legal system, our corporate governance, and just our basic business mindsets are heavily, heavily influenced by Roman law.
Right. Roman law is essentially this massive, highly complex algorithm.
Yeah.
Everything is modular, it's linear, and it's sequential. You have Rule A, which leads to Rule B, which triggers Clause C.
So the Western litigator mindset approaches a relationship by trying to anticipate every single possible variable,
A catastrophe.
every market fluctuation, and they try to lock it down in writing before anything even begins. We have this deep, almost religious belief that the text on the page is the ultimate reality.
If it is written down and signed by both parties, it is an absolute law.
It's the ultimate safety net. It's why you feel so confident bringing that 100-page contract to the boardroom.
Yeah.
You think, well, if things go south, I just point to paragraph 4, section B, and the universe basically has to obey.
But the Eastern mindset, heavily influenced by Confucianism, operates on a completely different frequency.
Totally different.
It's not modular at all. It's holistic.
Mm.
Negotiations don't start with microscopic details or, penalty clause.
They start with broad, sweeping principles, right?
Exactly. They want to know the trajectory. Are we heaven and heaven, moving in the same direction, or are we heaven and water?
That fundamental difference in how a contract is viewed creates these catastrophic, multi-million-dollar misunderstandings.
Oh, constantly.
The Western executive signs the paperwork and thinks, fantastic, the contract is signed, the negotiation is officially over. Now we just blindly execute the steps.
Right, we're done talking.
But the Chinese executive signs the exact same paperwork and thinks, fantastic, we have signed the greeting card. We have established the broad principles of our friendship. Now, the actual real-world negotiation of how we're going to survive together begins.
Exactly. It's just the starting line.
Okay, I have to bring up this wild anecdote from the sources because it completely broke my Western brain when I read it.
The restaurant story.
Yes. Our sources share this story about 3 men who are looking to form a business partnership. They sit down over this lavish dinner, they have a great time, they drink, they hash out the broad strokes of a deal.
And they actually sign a physical business contract right there at the table.
Right there. Everyone is all smiles, handshakes all around. But the moment they leave the restaurant and get home, one of the men picks up the phone, calls the other, and says, "Look, I only signed that contract tonight to give you face in front of the others." The contract is actually entirely void.
It sounds like complete madness to a Western legal mind.
It sounds like fraud. I mean, how is anyone supposed to do business? How does the global economy even function if a physically signed contract can just be brushed off as a polite illusion the moment you leave the room?
Well, if we pull back and look at the underlying logic, it's not that the contract is completely meaningless, it's that the nature of its meaning is different.
Right.
In the East, a contract isn't an absolute impenetrable shield made of Kevlar. It is simply the opening volley of a relationship.
If a framework.
Exactly. And the source notes something incredibly revealing about this dynamic. Chinese laws and business contracts often intentionally leave these massive glaring gaps.
Like what?
Well, they will outline a list of basic terms and then just throw in a tremendously broad other matters clause at the very end.
An other matters clause. A Western lawyer would look at that and have a complete panic attack.
Oh, they lose their minds.
That's not a contract. That's a giant loophole you could drive a freight train through. It goes against everything taught in law school about eliminating ambiguity.
But to the Eastern mediator mindset, strict, inflexible, hyper-detailed rules are actually seen as deeply unreasonable.
Unreasonable?
Almost offensive, because reality itself is inherently fluid. The future is entirely unknowable.
That makes sense.
If you lock me into a rigid, algorithmic set of terms today, based on today's market conditions, what happens when the global market crashes tomorrow?
Right, or when a pandemic freezes the supply chain. Or when currency values wildly fluctuate.
Exactly. If you are locked into the rigid contract, one side is going to get absolutely crushed by those unforeseen events.
While the other side just points to the paper and says, "Well, not my problem, pay up."
Precisely. And in a relationship-based culture, letting your partner get crushed because of a technicality on a piece of paper is abhorrent.
So the other matters clause, that intentional ambiguity, is actually a pressure relief valve.
Yes. It acknowledges up front that reality is going to change and the relationship will have to adapt to survive it.
The Chinese perspective fully expects that when the inevitable crisis hits, the partners will not run to their lawyers.
No, they will sit down at a table, rely on the deep relationship they've built, and renegotiate the terms in good faith to ensure both sides survive.
So the contract is just a temporary framework.
Yeah.
The ongoing relationship is the actual physical binding force.
That's exactly.
Okay, let's look at the immense cost of ignoring this cultural reality and trying to force the litigator issue. We have this fascinating source from the global law firm King & Wood detailing the struggles of massive, deep-pocketed luxury brands trying to enter the Chinese market.
This is a perfect example.
Imagine a high-end Western luxury brand, right? Let's say an ultra-premium Italian shoemaker. They want to sell in China, but they don't know the local market, they don't have the relationships, they don't speak the language.
So they need help.
Right, so they hire a local Chinese agent to manage their expansion. And because they're a Western company, they write up an incredibly strict, suffocatingly detailed Western-style agent contract. It says things like, "You are only authorized to open boutiques in these 3 specific approved luxury malls in Shanghai and Beijing. You can only sell the shoes at this exact, strictly enforced price point."
And absolutely no parallel imports.
Exactly. They lock down every conceivable variable.
And we know exactly what happens next. The ink on that ironclad contract is barely dry, and the local Chinese agent immediately starts breaking the rules.
It's immediately.
They start opening unapproved secondary stores in Tier 2 or Tier 3 cities that the Italian brand has never even heard of. They start engaging in parallel imports.
Let me pause and clarify that term for a second for everyone listening because it's crucial. Parallel imports, or the gray market. This isn't selling fake counterfeit shoes.
Right, these are the real shoes.
The agent is taking the genuine, authentic Italian shoes, but instead of selling them only through the ultra-expensive authorized boutique in Shanghai, they're secretly funneling them to unauthorized distributors, or selling them online, or moving them through back channels to other regions.
Right. They are violating the strict written terms of the distribution contract almost immediately. But you have to ask why they are doing it.
Why are they doing it?
In the mind of the local agent, the market is incredibly hot. There is a massive appetite for these shoes outside of just those 3 malls, and there is a fortune to be made right now.
Oh, I see.
Remember the Confucian mindset we talked about? We operate on broad principles. The overarching principle of this partnership is we are in business together to make as much money as possible.
So to the agent, the rigid geographic and pricing restrictions in the contract seem utterly unreasonable and restrictive given the booming reality on the ground.
Exactly. They are adapting to the reality to fulfill the broader principle.
So the Western brand eventually audits the agent and finds out. And the litigator mindset violently kicks in.
Oh, yeah.
The Italian executives look at the contract, they see a blatant, undeniable breach of the written rules, and they decide to drop the hammer.
They send the aggressive cease and desist letters.
Right. They threaten immediate termination of the partnership, they threaten massive lawsuits, and they demand absolute, groveling compliance with the text on the page.
And by playing the strict litigator, they completely and utterly destroy the relationship.
Completely.
Yes, legally speaking, under a Roman law framework, the Italian brand is 100% in the right. They have the moral high ground of the contract.
But practically speaking, it's a disaster.
A total disaster. The local agent is the one who actually controls the physical real estate leases.
Right.
The agent controls the local warehouse staff. The agent controls the regional supply chain. And most importantly, the agent controls the relationships with the local government and tax authorities.
So when the brand cracks down and threatens them, causing massive loss of face, the agent simply walks away. Or worse, becomes actively hostile.
And the brand might win the legal argument in a vacuum, but they just nuked their own bridge into the market.
They suddenly have no stores, no staff, no inventory movement. Their sales plummet to zero overnight, and they have to start from scratch, which could take a decade.
Heaven and water moved apart.
The trajectories were misaligned from day one. The brand is left holding a very legally accurate, beautifully drafted, completely worthless piece of paper.
It really makes you wonder, if a signed document doesn't actually enforce the deal, what physically prevents someone from just walking away?
This is where our Western brains really short-circuit. Because our immediate reaction is, well, fine. If they breach the contract, I won't just send a letter. I will drag them into international court.
I will sue them into oblivion.
Right. I will win, and the court will force them to pay me back every single cent they cost me.
Which brings us to a deeply terrifying concept. Let's play this out. Let's say you ignore all the warning signs, you refuse to compromise, you refuse to renegotiate, you fully embrace the litigator identity.
Okay, I'm a litigator. I'm going in.
You spend the money, you fight the brutal multi-year battle, and you actually win. The arbitrator issues the final ruling. You are victorious.
But as the sources show us, you might have won the battle, but you have fundamentally, permanently lost the war.
This is what we call the litigator's trap. And the Reed-Smith paper on international arbitration in our stack outlines this with chilling clinical clarity.
Walk us through that.
Well, in the West, we have this deeply ingrained, almost naive assumption about the justice system. We think, if I get a legal award, if the judge or the arbitrator bangs the gavel and says I'm owed $10 million, it means I am actually going to get a check for $10 million.
You assume the system will magically enforce the paper.
But the Reed-Smith source details the terrifying reality of what they call the Pyrrhic victory. A victory gained at such an apocalyptic cost that it essentially amounts to a defeat.
Or, as they bluntly refer to it in the cynical world of international arbitration, the dud award.
Oh.
Walk us through how a dud award happens. So you spend 3 years in international arbitration. You spend millions of dollars flying a team of elite corporate lawyers to Paris or Singapore. You argue the microscopic nuances of the contract for months.
It's exhausting.
You finally get that beautiful, legally binding piece of paper from the arbitration tribunal saying you definitively, unequivocally won. And then nothing.
Because the loser simply refuses to pay. It's that simple. They look at the award and they ignore it.
And because this is international business, enforcing that award across borders is a complete nightmare.
Oh, a total nightmare. The losing company might have seen the loss coming months in advance, so they quietly transferred all their liquid assets into offshore shell companies.
Yeah.
Or they might intentionally bankrupt the specific undercapitalized corporate entity that you actually sued.
Leaving you with a legally bulletproof claim against a hollow, empty shell that has $0 in its bank account.
Exactly. The award is legally binding, but practically, physically unenforceable.
So you have a theoretical $10 million on paper, but in reality, you are actually negative $2 million in legal fees. It is the purest definition of a Pyrrhic victory.
And the extreme lengths to which aggressive litigators have to go just to prevent this scenario from happening are, frankly, insane.
The Reed Smith source talks about a legal maneuver called the Morava Injunction. This sounds like something out of a geopolitical espionage thriller.
Doesn't it?
The source literally describes it as the nuclear weapon of English commercial law. It's a worldwide freezing order.
And the mechanics of it show just how broken the trust is. To get a Morava injunction, you have to go to a judge entirely in secret, an ex parte hearing.
Because if you tell them,
Exactly. You cannot tell your opponent you are doing this, because if you do, they will move the money immediately.
so you had to convince the judge to instantly, globally freeze every single bank account, property, and asset your opponent has anywhere in the world, just to paralyze them so they can't hide their money before the arbitration is even finished.
If you need to deploy a secret global nuclear legal weapon just to ensure the contract you both happily signed is actually honored, the fundamental system of trust is entirely broken.
You aren't doing business anymore. You are fighting a covert war.
And this raises a profound question about human nature, which, astonishingly, the I-Ching answered 3,000 years ago.
Let's go back to Hexagram 6. The very top line of the hexagram, line 6, describes the ultimate, final outcome of a brutal, litigious zero-sum victory. The tide reads, even if by chance a leather belt is bestowed on one, by the end of a morning it will have been snatched away 3 times.
Let's decode that. A leather belt, what are we actually talking about here?
Well, in ancient China, a highly decorated leather belt wasn't just a functional item holding up your garments, it was a massive symbol of official rank.
Right.
It was a status symbol, bestowed directly by the ruler or the emperor. It is the ancient equivalent of the arbitration award. It's the legal victory, the public declaration that you won the lawsuit, the validation that you are right and they are wrong.
Exactly. You fought the lawsuit, you crushed your opponent, and the emperor handed you the leather belt in front of everyone. But the I-Ching warns that a prize won through aggressive litigation and zero-sum conflict is inherently, hopelessly unstable.
It says, to win a case and receive a belt is not worthy of respect.
Why? Because by fighting so aggressively, by humiliating your opponent in a public court, by crushing them with the cold letter of the law and refusing any compromise, you have bred an enormous toxic amount of resentment.
You made them lose face completely.
Yes. So even if you win the belt, you enemies will spend every single waking moment of their lives trying to snatch it back.
They will dedicate all their energy to your destruction. They will hide their assets so you can't collect.
They will tie you up in endless frivolous appeals.
They will badmouth you to every supplier and distributor in the industry. The victory is incredibly fragile because it rests on a foundation of pure hostility. You won the legal argument, but you created an enemy for life who has nothing left to lose.
I'm so glad you mentioned the concept of resentment, because this isn't just ancient poetry or philosophical musings. This dynamic is hardwired into the evolutionary biology of human psychology.
Which brings us to a fascinating behavioral economics experiment detailed in the Chris Voss FBI negotiation source.
The ultimatum game.
Yes, the ultimatum game, and it completely, entirely shatters the Western economic idea that human beings are rational, logical calculators.
The ultimatum game is a classic in behavioral economics for a reason. Here's how it works. You have 2 participants, player A and player B. They are put in a room.
Okay.
The experimenter gives player A $10 in cash. The rules are simple. Player A gets to propose how to split that $10 with player B. They can offer any split they want.
And player B only has 2 options. They can either accept the split exactly as proposed, in which case both players get the money, or player B can reject the split.
Right. But, and here's the kicker, if player B rejects the offer, the experimenter takes the $10 back and neither player gets a single cent.
They both walk away with 0.
So let's analyze this purely through the cold, algorithmic litigator mindset.
Pure logic dictates that player A should offer player B exactly 1 single cent and keep $9.99 for themselves.
And according to classical economic theory, pure logic dictates that player B should happily accept that 1 cent.
Wait, really? Except the 1 cent, why?
Because 1 cent is objectively mathematically better than 0 cents.
Okay, sure.
A purely rational actor always maximizes their financial gain no matter how small. Emotion shouldn't factor into it. You are 1 cent richer than you were a minute ago.
But that is absolutely not what actual human beings do. I know for a fact if someone offered me 1 cent out of $10, I would tell them to go straight to hell.
Exactly. And the data backs this up. When the experiment is run globally, across different cultures, if player A offers anything less than, say, $3 or $4, player B almost always rejects it.
They reject it. Think about the profound implication of that. Player B will happily, intentionally walk away from free money and ensure they get absolutely nothing, simply to punish player A for making an unfair, disrespectful offer.
Burn it down.
Burn it down. That is the visceral human response. The perception of unfairness, the feeling of being completely crushed, disrespected, or exploited in a conflict triggers an overwhelming urge to destroy the person who insulted you, even if it costs you everything.
The Chris Voss source explicitly says, unfairness will make you prefer to see the whole deal burn down.
And the litigator mindset, using a rigid contract to squeeze every last drop of blood out of the other side just because you legally can, triggers this exact burn-it-down response.
You might have the legal right to take $9.99, but if you actually try to take it, the other side will flip the table, hide the assets, and salt the earth.
The multi-million-dollar dud award we talked about is literally just the corporate version of rejecting the 1 cent.
This is a perfect pivot point. Because if contracts can be an illusion, and if relying entirely on courts and litigation is a dangerous trap that leads to Pyrrhic victories and scorched earth retaliation, how on earth do you actually protect yourself?
Right. Whether you are doing business in Shanghai or just trying to navigate a complex partnership at home, if you cannot build your armor out of legal clauses and threats, what do you build it out of?
You build it out of social capital. You build it out of deep, resilient human relationships.
And this brings us to what we are calling the mediator's armor, the profound Eastern concepts of Guangxi and Mianzi. Let's start by unpacking Guangxi. We have this extensive, highly detailed World Bank report on corporate governance in China, and they dedicate a massive portion of their analysis to this single word.
In the West, we hear the word Guangxi, and we lazily translate it as networking.
Right. We think, oh, I have good Guangxi. We're connected on LinkedIn. We grabbed a coffee at a conference last year.
Which is a complete fundamental misunderstanding of the depth of the concept.
Totally.
The World Bank source clarifies that Guangxi is infinitely more profound than Western networking. It is an intricate, complex, lifelong web of deep interpersonal bonds. And the absolute defining characteristic of Guangxi is that these bonds are built, nurtured, and maintained over long periods of time, specifically without an immediate transactional need.
You don't wait until you have a massive supply chain crisis to suddenly try and build Guangxi with your logistics provider. You build it years in advance through dinners, favors, and mutual support when you don't need anything at all.
There is a quote from the source that just hit me like a ton of bricks. It says, "In the West, relationships grow out of deals. In China, deals grow out of relationships."
I want to repeat that because it flips the entire Western business model upside down. In the West, the contract, the transaction is the foundation. We sign the deal, and then maybe, if the deal goes smoothly and we make money, we become friendly and go play golf.
The relationship is a byproduct of the transaction.
Right. In the East, the deep personal relationship is the foundation, and the financial deal is merely a byproduct of that pre-existing trust.
And practically speaking, in the real world, Guangxi acts as an incredibly robust insurance policy.
How so?
Well, in an environment where, as we discussed, the legal system might be unpredictable or contracts are viewed as fluid and adaptable, Guangxi is the mechanism that actually enforces the agreement. It operates on a system of exchanged favors, a concept called ranking.
Ranking. How does that work?
Think of ranking as an emotional and economic bank account. When you do a significant favor for someone in your network, maybe you introduce them to a key official, or you help their child get into a good school, or you bail them out of a minor cash flow issue, you are depositing ranking.
You're building up a profound debt of obligation.
Exactly. They are now morally, socially, and almost spiritually obligated to return that favor in the future when you need it.
And if they default on that obligation, they don't get sued in a court of law. Instead, they get entirely, permanently ostracized from the entire Guangxi network. No one will do business with them again.
The social penalty of losing your network is infinitely more terrifying and effective than the legal penalty of a lawsuit.
I want to look at exactly how this network functions, because it is so radically different from how we operate. Let's bring in the source we have on tacit knowledge conversion in scientific tech teams.
That's a fascinating paper.
It really is. It looks at how invisible information and trust flow through networks. And it introduces a concept from network theory called structural holes.
Let's try to explain this.
Okay, imagine a map of a network. You have Group A over here. Let's say they're brilliant software engineers. And you have Group B over there. They are wealthy venture capitalists. Group A and Group B do not know each other.
So the empty space between them is a structural hole.
Exactly. In Western network theory, The person who steps in to bridge that hole, the broker, is in a position of massive exploitative power.
Right. The broker is the classic Silicon Valley middleman.
Yes.
The broker controls the flow of information between the engineers and the capital. Because they sit in the middle of the structural hole, they have information asymmetry.
They can manipulate what Group A hears from Group B, play both sides against each other, and extract a massive premium, a huge commission, just for making the introduction.
In the West, we celebrate the broker. We view them as a smart, opportunistic, highly successful entrepreneur.
But the source points out that in Confucian culture, this exact same behavior, exploiting a structural hole for personal gain, is viewed with absolute disgust.
It is seen as deeply unethical, selfish, and socially toxic.
They actually have a proverb for it: standing on two boats. If you try to play the Western broker in a Chinese network, withholding information and demanding a toll to introduce two parties, your reputation will be instantly destroyed. You will be seen as entirely untrustworthy.
Because it violates the core fundamental principles of Guangxi. Instead of being a broker who exploits the whole, the Eastern network requires you to be what the paper calls an integrator.
An integrator.
Yeah.
So an integrator introduces Group A and Group B, not to take a 10% cut of their deal, but as a freely given favor to both of them. You connect them seamlessly.
But wait, if you aren't taking a cut, why do it? Where is the value for the integrator?
The value's in the ranking. By freely making the connection, you invest your favorite capital. You build massive, deep trust with both the engineers and the venture capitalists.
Furthermore, you increase the collective intelligence and capability of your entire overarching network.
You aren't extracting a short-term cash toll. You are building long-term, compounding social wealth that will pay dividends in ways you can't even predict yet. The network becomes stronger, and you become the trusted heart of it.
Okay, so that is Guangxi, the network of favors. The other half of this mediator's armor is Mianzi, commonly translated as face.
We hear about saving face all the time, but the World Bank report makes it clear that Mianzi is not just about vanity or ego or looking cool.
Not at all. Mianzi is a hard, tangible social currency. It is the glue that maintains social stability, hierarchy, and respect.
In this system, you have to actively give face to others. You have to save your own face. And above all else, you must avoid causing anyone else to lose face.
And this profoundly, deeply impacts how conflict is handled, even at the highest, most sophisticated levels of corporate governance.
Take a typical Asian corporate boardroom. If a hotshot Western investor walks into that boardroom for the first time, they might be utterly shocked by what they see.
Definitely. The CEO proposes a new, massive strategic initiative, and everyone around the table politely nods.
There is rarely, if ever, any public disagreement. Nobody raises their hand and says, "I think this is a terrible idea."
To a Westerner raised on debate and friction, this looks like terrible, negligent corporate governance. It looks like a rubber stamp board full of sycophants.
Right. My immediate thought would be, if nobody is willing to challenge the boss, the company's going to drive right off a cliff. Where is the stress testing of the idea?
But the source explains that direct public conflict in the boardroom destroys Mianzi.
If a board director publicly tells the CEO their idea is terrible in front of the entire executive team, the CEO suffers a massive loss of face.
The director looks overly aggressive and disrespectful, and the harmony of the group is entirely shattered.
The ultimatum game burn-it-down instinct is triggered. So how does actual critical governance happen?
That happens in the shadows, doesn't it?
Exactly. It happens through back channels. Skilled directors use their guanxi.
If the CEO proposes a bad idea, a smart director will not say a single negative word in the boardroom. Instead, later that afternoon, they will invite the CEO for tea, one-on-one, completely behind closed doors.
In that private setting, they will gently, respectfully suggest an alternative route or ask questions that allow the CEO to realize the flaw in the plan themselves without any public embarrassment.
The bad idea is successfully killed, the company is saved from a mistake, but everyone's Mianzi is perfectly preserved. The governance system still works, it just operates on a completely different, much quieter frequency.
Okay, I have to push back here. Let's be entirely real for a second. That sounds like a beautiful, highly civilized cultural tradition. But isn't this just a fantastic built-in excuse for rampant corruption?
It's a fair question.
I mean, the World Bank source itself addresses this exact risk. If the entire economy relies on secret, unwritten favors, ranking and protecting everyone's face behind closed doors, doesn't that inevitably lead to what the report calls expropriation?
Yes, like a publicly listed company secretly bailing out a failing supplier just because the two CEOs have deep historical guanxi.
The public shareholders get absolutely robbed because of these hidden relationships.
That is a very valid, incredibly sharp challenge, and the World Bank report absolutely validates that risk. There is a very fine, sometimes blurry line between honoring a deep guanxi relationship and committing outright corporate fraud.
The shadow-related party transaction where value is siphoned off to help a friend is a massive systemic danger.
The report clearly advises that global investors and local companies must find a way to balance these deep cultural truths with the modern demands of global transparency and shareholder protection.
So you can't just throw out the rulebook completely.
No, you can't. However, and this is the absolute crucial takeaway for everyone listening, the report also firmly warns that if you march into a market like China, or, frankly, if you march into any deeply relationship-based dynamic, and try to violently impose aggressive, public litigator-style Western governance.
If you ignore guanxi, demand public audits of every conversation, and trample on mianzi,
You will be utterly, completely shut out. Your back channels will slam shut. You will never get the actual information you need.
you have to learn to achieve your goals through the cultural framework, leveraging the integrators and the private team meetings, not by fighting a war against the culture itself.
So we have clearly established that the absolute zero-sum victory of the litigator is a dangerous trap that leads to Pyrrhic outcomes.
And we've established that the social armor of the mediator guanxi, ranking mianzi, is crucial for long-term survival.
But how do we actually do this in the heat of the moment? How do we practically apply these lofty concepts when someone is literally screaming at us across the table, or actively threatening to sue us, or packing up their briefcase to walk out of a negotiation?
When we are actively under threat, what is the tactical playbook?
This brings us to the brilliant concept of tactical empathy and the strategic mastery of stopping in the middle.
Let's return to the ancient wisdom of the I-Ching, specifically the overarching judgment of Hexagram 6. It gives us what might be the single most important rule for navigating conflict. A cautious halt halfway brings good fortune. Going through to the end brings misfortune.
Going through to the end brings misfortune. Do not go for the total kill. Do not demand the dud award. Do not aggressively snatch the leather belt.
But how do we actually execute a cautious halt halfway when a visceral threat is on the table? We have this incredibly practical framework from the Harvard program on negotiation, the deal method.
Because, let's face it, our natural biological instinct when we are threatened is either to fight back harder or to flee and cave in.
Exactly. When a contractor threatens to walk off the job and sue you, or a partner threatens to blow up a merger, a direct counterattack matching their threat with a bigger threat from your lawyers just instantly escalates the conflict.
You end up in that unstoppable spiral of heaven and water moving further and further apart.
But giving in immediately, fleeing, is just as bad, because it reinforces their bullying tactics and you lose everything. The Harvard deal method offers a powerful middle path. The first step is diagnose.
You have to pause the panic and figure out why they are threatening you. The framework categorizes them into 3 profiles. Are they a victim, a pragmatist, or a bluffer?
Let's break those down. The victim is threatening you because they feel deeply unheard, disrespected, or offended. Their mianzi has been damaged. They don't actually want to sue you, they want acknowledgement.
Right, and the pragmatist is threatening you because they have very real, objective, terrifying constraints, like they literally will go bankrupt and lose their house if you don't change the delivery schedule. They are trapped.
And the bluffer is just insecure, power-tripping, and throwing their weight around to see if you flinch. Once you diagnose which one you are dealing with, you use the next steps: labeling and asking.
This source talks about a technique called process labeling. I want to practice this. What does process labeling actually sound like?
Process labeling is the art of calling out the toxic dynamic of the conversation without attacking the person themselves. It separates the behavior from their identity. So if the bluffer leans across the table and screams, "If you don't agree to these terms right now, I am going to ruin your reputation in this industry," your instinct is to say, "You can't do that. My lawyers will crush you."
Which is a counterattack. That's heaven and water.
Exactly. Instead, you use process labeling. You stay perfectly calm, and you say, "I don't consider threats to be a productive way for us to reach a solution. Let's put our heads together and find a viable path forward."
You completely neutralize the aggressive intent without insulting them. Then you pivot to asking what they call calibrated questions.
The goal of a calibrated question is to unearth the real, hidden constraint beneath the threat. If the pragmatist threatens a lawsuit over a delay, you don't argue about the delay. You ask, Why is a lawsuit a better option for you than continued talks?
Oh, that's brilliant. You force them to explain the why. It acts like a circuit breaker. It moves their brain out of the emotional attack mode, the amygdala, and forces them into logical problem-solving mode, the prefrontal cortex.
And this connects absolutely perfectly to the Chris Voss source, the FBI hostage negotiation tactics, because calibrated questions are all about giving the illusion of control to your opponent.
Voss points out something so profoundly counterintuitive about negotiation, something that goes against every sales seminar ever taught. You actually do not want the other person to say yes right away.
Wait, really? Every sales training I've ever seen is built on getting the client to say yes, the yes ladder. You ask obvious questions. Do you like saving money? Yes. Do you want a better product? Yes. Will you sign here? Yes. You build momentum.
Voss argues that is a massive trap. When you force someone into a yes, especially early in a tense negotiation, it makes them incredibly defensive.
Because they feel manipulated.
Right. They aren't stupid. They feel like they're being cornered. They feel like you are setting a rhetorical trap for them, and they are just waiting for the catch. It builds invisible resentment. Instead, Voss says you should actively, intentionally guide them to say no.
Guiding them to say no. Because saying no makes people feel safe.
Yes.
It gives them a feeling of power and control over the situation. It protects their boundaries.
Yeah.
And when we tie this back to the Eastern philosophy, allowing them to say no is a way of protecting their mianzi, their face.
Exactly. Instead of asking a high-pressure question like, do you agree to this new timeline? Which puts massive pressure on them to submit and say, yes, you flip it. You ask, would you be against looking at a slightly different timeline?
It's a subtle linguistic shift, but it changes everything. They get to say, no, I'm not against it. They feel entirely in control. They haven't committed to anything binding, but you have successfully advanced the negotiation.
It is verbal martial arts. You are using their own defensive energy to move the conversation forward.
Voss also talks about a technique called mirroring. This is so incredibly simple, but so shockingly effective. Mirroring is just repeating the last 3 or 4 words of their sentence, but with an upward inquisitive inflection like a question.
So imagine a colleague comes up to you, furious, and says, I cannot do this financial report. The regional data is a complete mess.
The litigator instinct is to argue. It's not a mess, you just aren't looking at the right spreadsheet.
Which just have to fight.
Right. But with mirroring, you don't argue at all. You just look at them and say, a complete mess.
And neuroscience shows us exactly why this works. When you mirror someone, it triggers a deep, natural biological instinct to elaborate and explain themselves.
They feel deeply heard, which instantly diffuses the emotional tension. They will naturally start filling the silence with more specific information. They'll say, yeah, a complete mess. The regional data hasn't been updated by the Shanghai office in 3 weeks, so my quarterly projections are going to be totally off.
And just like that, the conflict evaporates. Suddenly, you aren't fighting about whether or not they are going to be lazy and refuse to be the report. You are teaming up to diagnose the Shanghai regional data problem.
Voss calls this forced empathy. You are subtly bypassing their resistance without ever attacking their mianzi.
But the ultimate goal of all these tactics, the labeling, the mirroring, the calibrated questions, is not to just arrive at some weak, watered-down middle ground where everyone is unhappy. Voss has this incredible, highly relatable analogy about shoes to explain the danger of compromise.
Yes, the shoe analogy. Let's say you are getting dressed to go out to a nice dinner. You strongly want to wear your black shoes. Your spouse looks at you and strongly demands that you wear your brown shoes. You are at an impasse.
If you use traditional weak negotiation tactics, what we call splitting the difference or compromising, what is the outcome?
You compromise by wearing one black shoe and one brown shoe.
Which is an objectively terrible, disastrous outcome for everyone involved.
Exactly. True negotiation, the genuine mediator mindset, isn't about weak compromise. It's about using tactical empathy to uncover the hidden emotional driver beneath the surface demand.
Why does your spouse want you to wear the brown shoes? Is it because the brown shoes match the belt you are wearing?
Or is it because the black shoes are scuffed and need shining? Once you find the underlying driver, the scuffed black shoes, you can address that problem rather than fighting over the surface demand.
If we synthesize all of this, the ancient wisdom of the I-Ching, the behavioral psychology of the ultimatum game, the FBI hostage tactics, and the deep Chinese concepts of guangxi and face, we arrive at the ultimate master-level strategy for navigating human conflict. We call it the Golden Bridge.
The Golden Bridge. Sun Tzu talked about this. Build a golden bridge for your enemy to retreat across.
Exactly. The litigator fights to the bitter, bloody end to push their opponent off a cliff to achieve total victory and secure the leather belt.
But the mediator understands the cost of that.
Right. The mediator fights just hard enough to demonstrate their formidable strength, to show the bluffer that they cannot be easily conquered. But the exact moment that strength is established, the moment the opponent realizes they might lose, the mediator executes the cautious halt halfway.
They intentionally stop their advance, and they immediately graciously build a golden bridge for their opponent to retreat across.
You proactively give them a way out that saves their dignity. You let them save Mianzi. You say, it seems we had a genuine miscommunication on the timeline constraints. Let's adjust the delivery schedule by a week so your team isn't completely overburdened.
You take the blame for the miscommunication to save their face. You preserve the Guangxi, the long-term relationship, because you didn't humiliate them in front of their team.
And most importantly, you avoid the devastating trap of the Pyrrhic victory. You don't end up with a worthless dud award, you don't get the snatched away leather belt, and you don't trigger their urge to burn the deal down.
You end up with a functional, profitable agreement and a partner who deeply respects you, rather than a humiliated enemy looking for revenge.
It is the strategic, highly calculated application of empathy. Not out of weakness, and not out of some naive desire to be nice, but out of a profound, cold-blooded understanding of human nature and long-term consequences.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've traveled from the 3,000-year-old elemental hexagrams of the I-Ching through the incredibly complex, invisible web of Chinese Guangxi and corporate governance, all the way to the high-stakes, multi-million-dollar world of international arbitration and the psychological judo of FBI hostage negotiations.
And the pattern across all of human history is undeniable. The litigator who relies solely on the cold, hard text of a contract, who demands absolute submission and total zero-sum victory, is very often left holding a completely worthless piece of paper while their world burns down around them.
But the mediator, the one who truly understands the hidden currents of relationships, the volatile psychology of ego, and the vital life-saving importance of preserving face, they are the ones who actually protect their true long-term interests.
It's so true.
So, what does this all mean for you? When you find yourself in the heat of your next conflict, whether that's navigating a massive career-defining contract dispute at work, trying to manage an argument with a difficult vendor, or facing a fierce emotional disagreement in your own living room, I want you to resist that incredibly powerful, deeply biological urge to utterly crush your opponent.
Just remember that heaven and water moving in opposite directions only leads to a permanent, destructive rift.
Sometimes the absolute strongest, most masterful, and most profitable move you can make is to stop halfway, swallow your ego, and build a golden bridge for the other person to walk across.
And I want to leave you with one final, slightly different thought to mull over as we wrap up today. We have spent this entire time talking about external conflict, giving others a graceful way out, saving their face, preserving those external networks and relationships. But think for a moment about your own internal conflicts. Think about those difficult moments when your mind fiercely, ambitiously wants one thing, but your body, your energy levels, or your life circumstances demand something entirely different.
That's a great point.
In those private moments, are you acting as a brutal, unforgiving litigator against yourself? Are you demanding absolute perfection, enforcing rigid rules, and relentlessly beating yourself up when you inevitably fail to meet an impossible standard? What would happen if you applied the concepts of Guangxi and Mianzi to your own internal dialogue? What if you offered yourself a little grace, protected your own internal dignity, and allowed yourself a cautious halt halfway?
It really makes you wonder, if you wouldn't bring an ironclad 100-page contract to a dinner with a good friend, why do you keep bringing one to the relationship you have with yourself?